Illinois' fiscal year 2025 budget as it heads to Governor Pritzker's desk. Early this morning, House lawmakers passed the budget bills. They make up the largest budget in state history at more than $53 billion. Illinois Capitol Bureau Chief Max Cotton breaks down what's in the budget.
We're done.
That was Illinois House Speaker Emanuel Chris Welch after a marathon session Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, ending around 4:50 a.m. The highlight of the session, the largest budget in Illinois history at more than $53 billion. Representative Jahan Gordon Booth led budget negotiations for House Democrats.
No one, and I mean no one, is getting everything that they want. Some very difficult decisions were made, and I hope that people respect that. But I truly believe that this budget puts Illinois forward.
The budget includes more than $20 billion for education, a $350 million increase in K-12 spending. It also has $500 million for quantum technologies. There's also migrant-related spending, $160 million for welcome centers, as well as nearly $630 million for health care for undocumented immigrants. There's also $290 million for Home Illinois, Governor Pritzker's plan to combat homelessness, some of which can be used to house migrants. There's also a $1 per hour increase for direct support professionals who care for people with disabilities.
A budget that works for families, that works for businesses, and that works for our communities.
Republicans see the budget differently.
Illinois does not have a revenue problem. The majority party has an addiction to spending.
In addition to hammering Democrats on spending, Republicans took aim at the proposed tax increases. They include as much as tripling the sports wagering tax, capping the retailer's sales tax discount, and reducing the limit on the corporate net operating loss deduction. And the tax bill nearly failed. After two failed votes because Democrats did not have enough members in the chamber, they voted to change the rules, allowing a third vote, which passed after Democratic Representative Larry Walsh flipped to yes.
I think it should be clear to everyone in this state what this supermajority is willing to do to ram a tax increase down the throats of the citizens of Illinois.
In Springfield, Max Cotton, WGEM News.
The state Senate passed the budget bills Sunday night. Early this morning, following the budget's passage, Governor Pritzker released a statement praising it, saying he's looking forward to signing the plan into law.